What's up, everyone? Welcome into a new edition of Celtics Beat. Adam Kaufman, Evan Valenti, and of course, as I always tease him, the longtime radio voice and sometimes TV voice of the Boston Celtics, John Grande.
Because it's going to be, maybe it was the long-time radio voice, but it's the very short-time, halftime TV voice or whatever we're calling it. So what is the thing Evan did where he crosses his fingers like
I just do different things with my hands because I'm Italian and I'm not quite sure what to do in the beginning.
Sometimes he hits you with one of these.
Yeah, you know, if you do like that little wave, it seems like you're waving to like a little, like your daughter. And like,
yeah, I'm just trying to sometimes
Evan's flashing gang signs.
I don't know.
At the beginning of every show.
Yabu.
Yeah. Do the dab. I remember.
Are you going to do the Shaq Omega at the beginning of a show?
Maybe when I'm running out of stuff to do, that's for sure. The bow and arrow, I remember it's collegiately. I think Jamal Murray in Kentucky started doing something like that. Because Jamal made a ton of threes back in, he's making a ton of threes now, but when he was in college, he was just fun to watch as a standalone shooter. And every time he put one in, the entire bench mob of Kentucky would just be doing this the whole time. I just thought that was cool.
No, go crazy. Teach us how to Dougie. Go crazy.
I don't know how to do that. That's beyond my.
You don't have enough room to do the gritty, do you? Sean, you're in a hotel room. Can you do the gritty up there?
I don't. What goes on in hotel rooms and whatever, but I don't think.
Well, if you're watching on YouTube, you're welcome, and if you're listening to the audio version of this show, we're off to just a terrible start, but that's okay because you know what's off to a really good start. Is the Joe Mazzulla era, guys. The Joe Mazzulla era, it's only 2 preseason games in, but we're off to, I like what we've seen so far. You got a 43-point blowout preseason win with 40-plus assists, an incredible ball movement, and like 100 turnovers, but who cares? They still won by a ton. And the second game, that probably would have been another blowout win, except he took all the starters out when they were up 18, 20 points. And then, the unit of guys who probably won't be around in a few days are, largely responsible for letting that thing drift away and an overtime loss. But again, preseason wins, losses, it doesn't matter. It's all about development and signs and indications. And what we've seen so far, we'll go kind of bit by bit as we go on in the show, Sean, but sort of the 10,000 foot view as you sometimes refer to. Jason Tatum looks rested. Jaylen Brown looks all NBA. Sam Hauser looks like a real contributor as part of the rotation off the bench for this team, which, I think to the surprise of almost everybody compared to what, the summer chatter was around this team. Malcolm Brogdon is fitting in seamlessly. Blake Griffin hasn't appeared in a game yet, but already looks like a real glue locker room guy. Grant Williams has added a dribble to his bag of tricks in a contract year. You can go on and on. Boston looks ready to contend, Sean. I think they, despite obviously the drama of recent weeks and the change at head coach and all that is going on behind the scenes, they don't look like they've skipped a beat from what we last saw in the NBA Finals.
No, you covered it. Good night, everybody. That's pretty much.
See you later.
Preseason game.
Good show, guys.
That was it. Thanks for checking in.
We'll get into a deeper analysis of each of these issues as we continue.
Don't forget to visit our advertisers. I thought
buy your T-shirt, Celtics Beat.
What I thought about Sunday is that I think it mattered to have a game and have a game go well because it was very odd being in the building. I think in the 2 or 3 hours before the game on Sunday because of everything that's happened the last couple of weeks. And there was so much familiarity and so many players coming back and so many broadcasters coming back and so many fans coming back, but something significant has happened. So I think to have a game go well and a blowout game and how you can beat somebody by 40 when you have 28 turnovers is insanity. I don't even know how you statistically do that, but they did. I think it mattered the same way. At the end of the year, in the middle of the year, who's going to care, right, that they won the first preseason game by 40? The same way nobody's going to care that Phoenix lost to the team from Australia in the first preseason game. But it's just like as the Celtics needed that's the last thing Phoenix needed coming off a Game 7 loss, just from just feel good about life, let's move on standpoint. So I think that's the thing to me that mattered about Sunday. But everything you said is right, and it's just been that's a feel good. It's 2 preseason games, but all we have are 2 preseason games to talk about. And why wouldn't you feel good about Jaylen Brown? The only thing I would feel bad about with Jaylen Brown is if we see him again. I'm sure we will in Montreal, but to me, that's bubble wrap. Do not pass go. Mm-hmm. Don't collect to it. Go right to opening night and see you there because he looks great. And I think the issues that the Celtics are going to deal with here, which is obviously the lack of size, putting too much too many minutes on Al, which is a concern for me in the first half of the year into the regular season. These are issues, but they're not issues right now. So enjoy watching, Sam Hauser show that that's not a fluke. What everybody's been talking about, his ability to shoot. By the way, nobody had heard of Duncan Robinson either. Right? And now he's made 200 threes a year. Okay. Except for
Williams College. That's it. That's all I got.
Except for Evan, and he's dabbing and he's doing a bow and arrow. Because I heard of Duncan Robinson, but nobody else had.
Evan will tell you about Max Strus too.
It is the pejorative. And by the way, I mean, how about Max Strus could fit on this roster too?
Yeah.
You have, if let me put it this way, I'll say it, the soundbite that I came up with last night late in the game was, if Sam Hauser is going to require teams to defend him, the Celtics are going to be a problem. That is a problem for other teams, because that's adding something that you thought you were going to have with Gallinari that maybe you've had here all along.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what, we've spent so many shows in the off season and in talking about, what do they need to do? And obviously the excitement surrounding Danilo Gallinari. And then obviously he goes down in the FIBA World Cup qualifier, and it's, oh my God, how do you replace him? Because obviously the Celtics felt that there was a need there, enough of a need to go out and spend the money and get the veteran and all of that. Well, if you believed in Sam Hauser from the beginning, you don't go out and necessarily chase a Danilo Gallinari and give him the money that you did. So how do you go about replacing him? And so it was, I feel like I've sort of spent a lot of the summer months talking out of both sides of my mouth with Sam Hauser, in that, part of me is sort of not taking him seriously as a prospect, a guy who can truly develop and be not neglecting his ability to shoot. We saw it in Maine. We saw it in fleeting moments in Boston, but it was, can he be a reliable contributor? Can he be the microwave off the bench? Can he give you, real rotation minutes? And as you just said, require guys to actually guard him. Can he matter? Can he be important? And the answer was always, probably not, which is why they're chasing X, Y, and Z, or need to pursue, X, Y, and Z. And now that we've seen it for a couple games, and that I do believe, as so many others, it's not a fluke. His shooting ability is not a fluke. Well, now you start to wonder, at least a little bit, not knowing the timeline of Gallinari, obviously, if his injury, for the sake of development and having a younger player on this roster turn into something, if his injury was something of a blessing in disguise, or obviously at worst case for Hauser, a silver lining to show, hey, I belong and this is what I can do for you.
The reason you didn't believe it is because this doesn't happen in the NBA. We've heard of players from the time they were 16 years old. So you don't think of, with the exception of Evan and Duncan Robinson, guys can sneak through the cracks. The shooters can, and be ready. And we kept hearing, last year, late in the year, if you're around the Celtics at all last year, and around people in the organization, it was, hey, Sam Hauser is going to be a part of this team next year. Sam Hauser is going to be able to play. But that's more of it's like a college football thing. I remember doing Boston college football back in the late 90s, and you played Virginia Tech every year because it was a Big East team, and they were both in the same conference, and talking to the Virginia Tech people and them saying, hey, we got this kid here. He's not playing right now. He's going to be a redshirt next year, and Michael Vick, and he's going to be a game changer that's something you hear, these sort of mythical tales in college football, maybe a first-year quarterback in the NFL that's going to be something eventually, because you're hearing, obviously Brady didn't play, his first year. So, Evan, did you hear of? Did you know all about Zappy too? Were you on that?
I'm
Western Kentucky and in junior college.
A little research on Bailey Zappy.
Hey, fourth round pick. He wasn't a complete and total nobody.
I'm not that deep on Bailey Zappy.
How many on this Zoom have done a football game at Western Kentucky?
Oh. No, never.
Yeah.
No. Playoff game.
not it.
1994.
Love it.
What is now FCS playoffs? Yeah, on the legendary Channel 68. Which is, we used to have channels, kids, that were like way up in the, up in the UH.
You know, spin a dial back in the day.
Yep. Back in the way back in the last century. But that's why, because you don't hear about Sam Hauser, and that's for the beauty of the preseason, right? Like there is stuff going on. Who's going to make this roster? Is Noah Vonleh going to be a body here? What can Blake do? I don't know about you guys. I'm struggling, because every time I see Blake, and he was on the flight with us today, every time I see him, the only thing on my mind is Jamie Foxx doing Doc on Jimmy Fallon.
Talking about Blake.
It's not on Blake. It's not Blake's fault. It's literally the only thing I
Have you brought that up to him yet?
I haven't talked to him yet because he was on a flight.
See, you think of that whenever I think of Blake Griffin, I think of the Key and Peele sketch with the substitute teacher saying Balake over and over. Me and you, Balake. That's what I think of every time. For better or worse.
You guys are on the internet anyway, so YouTube the Jamie Foxx on.
Oh, it's so good.
It's just so unbelievable.
Good at that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So good. It's so good. Hauser, for anyone that, has somehow missed it or just doesn't know the numbers, by the way, 36 points, 9 of 13 from 3 in his 2 preseason games so far. So yeah, it's obviously looked good. It's been fun. And I like the little, jabbing from Jason Tatum about his, asking if Hauser was a better shooter than him. He's saying, like, no way in hell. And he ought to be sending me a thank you card for the fact that he's so wide open and all of that stuff. Not to promote the competition, but Chris Forsberg, who's a good friend of this show and his podcast, I think earlier today, just interviewed Sam Hauser's mother actually, and put a little, video clip of it online. And she was saying that when he was, little, like 2-3 years old, old enough to, kind of stand and shoot a little Nerf basketball on a toy hoop on his own. That was how they punished him. Whenever if in the rare times he would actually get into trouble, it wasn't like go to your room. It was they took basketball away from him. So from the very beginning, Sam Hauser, it's been all about hooping.
That's right.
Chris needs this because Rob is out. So
yes, very much. He needs a new binky.
And somebody
needs a new binky.
He needs
absolutely.
He needs that security blanket.
Now, Sean, I don't know how much contact you've had with Danilo just because he really hasn't been with the team at all. And because he's not familiar maybe with American sports history and just one of my favorite Bill Belichick quotes of all time. Do you think that Danilo knows anything at all of the history of Wally Pipp at all or no?
I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that he does not. And I'm going to suggest that most people under the age of us do not know who Wally Pipp is. Listen, I've got my son's about to turn 11, and I've educated him in every possible turn, so he can be a 50-year-old.
Yeah, it's important.
Have all this information, but you'd be amazed at what people don't know. It's there's a player. We're probably going to see Bryce McGowan's for Charlotte in the preseason game tomorrow night. He was born 2 weeks after, and I remember the Celtics had this horrendous start in 02-03, and they went down to Washington the second game of the year, and they got crushed on TNT. And it was a year that turned out to be, decent for them in 02-03. Bryce was not born. We're seeing players in the NBA that were, I know. So for perspective, when I first took this job, it was, I used to watch back in the Larry Bird era. The championship was 14 years ago. So there are kids in college now that don't have a great memory of the Celtics championship. So, and again, that's one of the challenges of doing radio, doing TV, whatever you're doing is I'm broadcasting to people who are 80 and 18. So you have to have all the knowledge, but you can't forget you're always older than you think you are. And a lot of the stuff, like Wally Pipp, when was that? It was that's 90 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. One of the cool things about it's funny, we stay there with the Celtics now in Detroit. Now that the Pistons are downtown, one of the hotels we stay at, the same hotel I stayed at with the Red Sox when I was doing the Red Sox game. It's in 2013, and it's completely renovated Weston, but it's the same hotel, and it has a staircase that goes from the lobby to the second floor. That the staircase stayed there, even though they did all the renovations around it. That is the staircase that Lou Gehrig fell down in Detroit that led to him not playing that day and ending the 2,130 consecutive.
No kidding.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
So you end up touching history once in a while for paying attention.
Yeah.
It's baseball. Baseball obviously lends itself to that.
Yeah.
Thank you for not asking me about my first year as a Red Sox season ticket holder. I think I jumped in at the absolute perfect time. Just worked out really well.
Yeah, right. This has been a great year of baseball. Really.
But yeah, I think in fairness to you, we will not dissect all things 2022 Red Sox.
They were great. They were a fun last place team. I'll say that. For
76
wins.
As fun as the last place team can be, I guess. They went well down the stretch, I guess. Joe Mazzulla. Let's talk a little bit about Joe, but not so much everyone has gone in depth, including on this show, about Joe the person and his character, and obviously Brad Stevens and what management thinks of him and his co-coaches and the players that speak so highly of him. So we don't need to go down that road because, you know, I unless there's a very personal experience you have shared with Joe, then by all means. But I don't know that, you know, there's a lot to add to it. What really interests me through the first, we haven't seen a real game yet, but through 2 games and just sort of juggling a little bit with everyone getting a turn, nobody's playing 30 minutes and evaluating talent, obviously. Have you seen anything through a couple preseason games that indicates to you what kind of head coach Joe Mazzulla is going to be?
Well, I don't think he's going to be a coach that changes a lot of things. I mean, it's unusual. Look at the talk about the dichotomy of Joe and Will Hardy, right? 2 finalists in Utah, both the 2 youngest coaches now in the league, and it feels like Utah is already 2-21. I mean, after watching the top 2 picks in the draft play against each other and watching the social media craze here, and Utah being at the top of the list of teams that. Do you believe Danny Ainge was misleading earlier in the spring when he was like, "Man, we're not going to trade Donovan"? And go, it's crazy. I can't believe that.
Weird. That's so out of character. I mean, he never does that.
And why? And by the way, like, it's under the umbrella of, why don't we all be smarter about the information we take in, whether it's on Twitter, social media, wherever it is. Like, did anyone believe Danny? That's what Danny was supposed to say.
That's what I was shouting when Danny retired in the first place.
And then thought he was going to not do all of that. That was
come on.
Although
he just went to Utah as a consultant.
My guy Windy, though, right? Like why would?
Oh man, what a legendary team.
It's the great meme of our time.
Best.
Martin Short. What's the Martin Short? Oh, Jiminy Glick.
Yeah.
Why would Danny Ainge? Why?
Oh, he just put on a clinic that day.
Yeah.
It was,
it was awesome. Incredible television for 2 minutes.
It was the absolute best.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so, you know, look at Will Hardy in Utah, and Joe is in a different situation. Joe, even if he had time to come in and reinvent the wheel and put his own personal stamp on it, his team, the team he is taking over, had leads in the 4th quarter of Game 4 of the NBA Finals to go 3-1. And it's funny, I've even forgotten until I watched the game recently, 2 weeks ago, that the Celtics had the lead late in the 3rd quarter of Game 5. I had forgotten that. To me, there was this amalgam in my mind, confusing, like Game 2 and Game 5. I was thinking of them the same way, and they weren't. The Celtics fell behind, had that great 3rd quarter, came back and took the lead. So, and this is a team that was that close to a championship. So how many things are you really going to change? And it's a team that is set up to defend at a ferocious pace and defend the 3-point line. And, you know, with the Sam Hauser tweak and with a little more shooting, obviously to be able to spread the floor and cutting down on the turnovers, you're going to be right there. And now the Celtics have a very strange scenario they're sort of stumbling into of not being underdogs, but because of everything that happened with Ime, because of Gallinari, because of Rob Williams, the Celtics may be the betting favorite. I know you guys are all into that, but no one's really talking about them to the point, like, I'm all in. I'm a Philly bandwagon guy, which is a great way to get thrown through the windshield, right? Like, of the Sixers bandwagon, but I'm there because I can't help it. And I was, you know, I loved Milwaukee all last year. I think the Nets, who look terrible in the game they're playing right now, the Nets could win 60, they could win 36. You literally don't know. You know, everyone's all excited about Cleveland, all these other teams. You know, there's buzz about Toronto. They play like 6 guys who are 6'8". They're going to be different. And so the spotlight of being the favorite, I think, has vanished from the Celtics. And this is a group that is largely the same group in continuity, especially early in seasons. How many times have we seen this? Golden State got off to that great start last year before guys got hurt and things like that. So it's, you know, I think it's almost set up for the Celtics now to surprise some people. And again, if you're Joe Mazzulla, going back to the question, what are you going to change?
So you don't think stylistically, philosophically, and I'm not saying anything should change, obviously, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. But do you think that he is
let me jump, because here's where he is the guy that wasn't an Ime guy, right? He was here before.
Right.
So he wasn't part of that staff, the Ime staff. Who hired Ime? Who brought Ime here? Whose choice was it? Brad was. So Brad and Ime, it's not like Brad went out and said, "Look, I got to find someone who believes the exact opposite of what I believe, and it's going to change everything, who I do not see eye to eye with on anything." And I'm going to. So Brad chose Ime. He chose Joe. This is all. It isn't like this. Hey, there's the Ime guys over here, and there's Joe Mazzulla here, and there's completely different. everybody's. I mean, truthfully, everybody's really on the same page right now. Why wouldn't you be? It's a pretty good page to be on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. When the news broke, I was a little stunned they did it so quickly, and that Joe was the guy to get the bump up.
Sure.
And it's not like everybody on that bench has a ton of NBA experience. I mean, there's a couple of guys there have been assistant coaches, in various stops around the league, and there's Mighty Mouse, with Pacific and coming
And
over.
so,
And I when Joe, and again, to bring it somewhat full circle here, I remember watching Joe Mazzulla in college, and then as soon as I totally forgot about that whole experience, and then all of a sudden he was named head coach, and then it dawned on me when I'm like, I definitely watched a bunch of big Monday games with Bob Huggins coaching Joe Mazzulla and whatever,
he was there for a while. I was with Gary Cohen, the great voice of the Mets and TV voice, who's good, Hall of Fame finalist along with Joe Castiglione. And I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago, and Joe Mazzulla came up because he was asking me what's going on with the Celtics. I'm like, didn't he play like 7 years at West Virginia? Because he had a redshirt year, so he was there a lot, had a lot of TV time, and yeah, no question. But let me throw one out here. The interesting discussion, which is Joe is in this spot because he's in this spot, and nobody wanted this to happen the way it happened. What if? Hold on, let me do the windy. What if the path that Joe was on, his trajectory as a finalist for the Utah job, what if he was going to get the next job somewhere, wherever it was, and he was going to become one of the great young coaches in the league and the next Eric Spoelstra, and that was going to be his path. But instead, this thing happened. So here he is now. Maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're going, oh yeah, Joe Mazzulla, what an obvious choice that was. Look at what he's done. Look at his success. But of course, here we are. It's happened the way it's happened. So, of course, it looks a lot more uncertain than it would have under normal circumstances. Nobody's talking about Will Hardy.
Well, no, not
and they won't be.
not yet. Yeah, not well. I mean, not and it won't be viewed as his fault anyway. What happens there in Utah?
Right,
obviously, he was brought on to sort of
exactly.
The
danger. Will's danger is what happened with Brad. Brad's first year here, when Brad wasn't getting the program here, and he was winning games. Remember that first month of the year, the Celtics.
25. You want to talk about entertaining last place teams? That 25-win team was an entertaining last place team because they won their games. They tried hard.
They won their games early in the year. The Celtics were in first place in mid-late December. They were under 500, but they were in first place.
Yeah,
in the Atlantic Division.
That was a glorious division.
And then Toronto. That's when Toronto took off and started their what turned out to be a 5-year run, right? Whatever, atop the division. But yeah, Brad was, it was just so funny because they were so outmanned, and he would MacGyver together these games.
It was unbelievable.
And he'd build a lead, and all of a sudden you look up and it's like, oh my God, the Celtics are winning, and it's the middle of the second quarter. And it was like one of those games where you're watching somebody tied with Alabama in the second quarter, like 10-10, and eventually there's too many plays. And there's too much skill difference or whatever. And these college football teams win 55-10, even if you can stay with them for a little while because the games are too long.
So just building off of what you were just talking about with Joe and sort of him potentially being, that next young thing that people would like Will Hardy to be at some point. And obviously, what Brad was when he got here from Butler and what, we all hope Joe Mazzulla is in fact going to be. Ime Udoka is not going to be back in Boston. And I don't say that as a question. I say that as a declarative statement. Ime Udoka is not going to be back in Boston. I would be shocked beyond anything else that we've ever talked about on this show if Ime Udoka is once again ever patrolling the Boston sidelines. So what does it take for Joe to shed the interim tag, even if it's not this year, in the off season a year from now, going into next year, for him to not get that opportunity, for them to, go on an actual search for a new head coach, a fourth in 4 years, exactly how bad does this year have to go for him to not get that opportunity? And I don't believe this will be a bad year, by the way, but I'm just, worst case scenario where it's, maybe Joe Mazzulla is not the guy.
Pretty bad, but again, the problem is you went to the finals last year. So history says, forget anything happened in the last month and Ime's coaching here. History says the Celtics weren't going back to the finals because young teams that go to the finals almost always take a step back. The Bucks didn't get anywhere near the finals because the Celtics took them out. This is how it happens. A lot of people think that run in Phoenix is over, that their window is closed all of a sudden to win a championship. And it's just, the East, as we know, this is nothing revolutionary here that I'm saying, but this is my 25th year in the league, and this is far and away the best the Eastern Conference has ever been. There are going to be good teams that end up in the play-in. There are teams that would be insulted if I said, well, you're going to be in the play-in. What do you mean we're going to be the Atlanta Hawks or the Toronto Raptors or whatever? Guess what? Do the math. There's 8, 9 good teams in the Eastern Conference. There's some good teams are going to be in the play-in. So that said, you're sort of set up to not have success that way. I think it would have to go bad from an optic standpoint. It doesn't look like the players are with what Joe is doing. I mean, I can't, we've all seen scenarios like that. Maybe bickering behind the scenes. Listen, if players are unhappy with the coach in 2022, guess what? You're going to hear about it. It's going to leak out because it always does. And then you're going to have, who knows, you're going to end up like they have in Brooklyn, where you have that essentially everything that was said that gets said in a breakup, and then they didn't break up.
Yeah.
And it's like awkward, when everybody's back together again. So I think it would have to go pretty badly. And who knows? Listen, we sit here in October, famously or infamously, I did an interview on opening night 5 years ago saying what I always say, which is, listen, something major is going to happen 5 minutes into the season that we don't know is going to change your trajectory. And of course, that was the night Grande got hurt.
Yeah.
And and the East, all these East teams we're talking about, they'll have a legitimate chance to win the championship. What if something happens to Jason Tatum? What if something happens to Embiid? What if any of these guys slip on a banana peel? What if something happens to Giannis? It doesn't seem possible. It seems like if, like the banana peel would get hurt if like Giannis. That's the point. Something always happens that we can't possibly imagine as we're talking here in early October. That said, on paper, the Celtics look like one of the 7 or 8 teams that are in that elite category. And I think it would have to go pretty badly askew for Joe not to get a second shot, assuming your declarative statement before, which I will not comment on if that plays out.
One thing that has gotten, I think, a little lost, Sean, not lost in, I'm sure you've talked about it plenty on the radio, and it's not like people are unaware, but lost a little bit in the conversation with everything else that has happened on the sidelines, and then the immediacy of, oh my God, Sam Hauser. People aren't really talking about not having Rob Williams for the first half of this year right now. And what is the approach going to be? Is it going to be all the small ball that we're expecting? Are we going to see, Grant getting more minutes, even potentially starting games at the 5, or Al Horford, are they going to be able to manage his minutes in the way they would still like to and go small? I had our friend Mark Murphy, the recently retired Mark Murphy, texted me the other day and just said, I've been thinking, what about starting Blake Griffin at the 5? Because Lord knows, obviously he, takes charges and is aggressive in the middle, just to experiment it and see what it would look like. What are your thoughts on how this is going to go during the time that we don't have Rob?
Well, the nice thing is that you got different options that you're going to try. I think it'll be different night to night. There are teams like Toronto that play in Pascal Siakam in center, and you're playing a team in Charlotte that doesn't have a dominant center, obviously, in Plumlee. So it's all well and good. It's all fun and games till opening night, right? and then guess who's coming to dinner? So it's going to be a night to night thing. I think I'm not calling Rob Williams the MVP of the team last year, but anyone that's listened to us knows. I talked about this quite a bit, that the Celtics season was 3 acts last year. You had the first 40 some odd games and under 500, this and that. Wherever you want to call that dividing line, you call it. But for the 9-10 weeks after that, the Celtics were not just the best team in the NBA. It wasn't even close. It was not close. They were the runaway best team, championship caliber team. I don't know who was second, but it wasn't close. The night that the Celtics completed the run from 11th place to first in the Eastern Conference was the night that Rob Williams got hurt, the Sunday night game against Minnesota. And from that point on to the end of the finals, for those 12 weeks, the Celtics were good. They were really good. They had iconic moments and Game 7 victories, and they were one of the best teams in the league. But they weren't dominant without Rob Williams. They were really, really good, but not dominant. So to me, it is the most important part right now. Facing the Celtics right now is get Rob healthy. And I don't care if it's February 1st. It won't be, I don't think, but I don't care. Get Rob Williams healthy, because that's your chance to be the dominant team you saw last year is having Rob Williams healthy. And to me, get there I do not want to see Al Horford playing 2,200 minutes. Again, it's just, You don't want that at 36. He's not coming off a bye year in OKC. He's coming off a year in which he helped lead his team to the finals.
Totally.
And it's just with Rob, the explosiveness on both ends of the floor, the way he changes the geometry offensively with, the fact that he can just dive to the basket, throw up in the air, doesn't matter where it is, and he'll just go up and get it. And then his roaming as like a free safety on defense changes so many things. It's again, unless you really watched the difference, again, the switch from making him, guard opposing fives to guarding the guy in the corner, being able to just kind of muck things up in the middle of the defense was a ginormous change. And again, they were just blowing teams out. I mean, I go back to the game they played the Utah, and we actually had Gorman on shortly after that. And I was like, have you ever seen a better start to a game than that game? Because I don't think I've seen one. I mean, the game was over after the first quarter, and at halftime, I think they were up like 20 or 30. And it was like they're on a different planet than Utah was. And
I mean, that game, the Utah, these are the good Western Conference teams. Those two games you're talking about came right after that West Coast trip that I just referenced, where I did the TV with Scout.
Yeah. Where
the game they got tired of that OKC game, and the Thunder had one of those fool's gold comebacks. They cut it from like 30-9 right at the end of the game. But that series of games was absurd. That the degree, I tweeted the numbers a million times. You can go back and look at them. But that 30 game stretch was better than the 27-2 to start the title defense year. It was better than the 29-3 to start the championship year. It was as dominant as any Celtic team had ever been, plus the fact that was the best road team the Celtics have ever had, which carried over.
Right. So you talk about managing health and managing minutes and all those things. Where's the sweet spot in terms of, like the regular season is going to be what it is. Obviously, we need to take it seriously, but at the end of the day, we got to get into May, got to get into June. We need to be healthy as a unit. And you're going to sacrifice some wins, some games to get there. How much do you sacrifice? Because you look at, people are like, oh yeah, regular season doesn't matter. I'm like, yeah, well, it would be nice to play at home. I mean, they don't have to win the most games in the Eastern Conference, but like to have home court advantage until the Eastern Conference Finals would be nice. I'm not saying, go all out to try and accomplish that. But at the same time, I feel like some people are like, it's the regular season. Who cares anyway? I'm like, well, I don't know. I'd rather not go on the road 3 straight series and try to go to the NBA Finals that way.
You just said you want to eat home court advantage until the conference finals, which to me says you're going to be a 2 seed.
Right.
To be a 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, that's going to be, that's 55, 56 tough wins in a really tough conference with all those competitive teams and very few easy nights. Because, by the way, Detroit's got Cunningham and Ivy and Bogdanovich. There are no easy nights. By the way, everyone is, and I'm sure the Pacers will make the trade, right? They'll make a trade at some point. But right now, that's Miles Turner, Buddy Hield, Halliburton, and it's the team that everybody is universally calling the worst team in the NBA and the worst in the Eastern Conference. And they've still got real players. And by the way, they bludgeoned. I'm not sure Charlotte's not the worst team in the Eastern Conference, by the way, if they don't get Bridges back. But Indiana bludgeons Charlotte the other night, preseason, all the stuff, the precursory stuff. It's going to be very difficult to do it. And to your point, you got to stay top 4. You say, top 4, that's no problem. Really? Because I just named Philadelphia, Milwaukee. You got to stay ahead. All right, Philadelphia and Milwaukee and say Brooklyn. That's 3 right there. That means the Celtics have to stay ahead of Miami, the Cleveland Cavaliers that everybody loves, Toronto, to guarantee you finishing 4th. You're going to have to finish ahead of, Miami and good teams. So that to me is the story of the season. The NBA is deeper than it's ever been, but the Eastern Conference is absurd. And to your point about home court advantage, I've been saying this for years. It has not yet come to fruition, but I'm going to say it again this year because this will be the year. It's been 25 years since an Eastern Conference team won 50 games and did not open the playoffs at home. That streak is going to end on April 15th. It has to. There's just too many good teams.
Malcolm Brogdon, we haven't really talked about him at all. We've seen in 2 preseason games, 9 assists per in limited minutes, 20 plus minutes per game, but he hasn't hit 30. He's, really, it just seems like outside of the relentless attack and defensive prowess, just the playmaker, quite frankly, that everyone was looking for in the NBA Finals. And that's what we were all screaming for at the time and thrilled about when Brad made this trade, a trade that looks like a complete and total steal, provided Malcolm Brogdon actually stays on the floor, which has been a problem, obviously, throughout his entire career. If he can stay healthy, and I don't even care how many games he plays, he doesn't need to play 70 games. He can play 50 games for all I care. If he's healthy come the postseason, obviously, that is the most important thing. Has he fit in even better than you expected? Is this what you expected? What have you taken away from his first couple of games?
Oh, it's 12 days and 2 preseason games, but of course, and I do expect it because Brogdon's a guy that Max and I we've always had a player crush on him, and he's always killed the Celtics. And he just, it's an easy cliche and a one that you sort of use, you throw it away, but he knows how to play.
Mm-hmm.
And he fits in with this group. If anything, he's been too unselfish to me. And I think he's too, he was the guy in Indiana. So he had to do all the things we're talking about him doing on this team and be the primary scorer. Now that's the last thing he has to worry about. So it's, figuring out a new role, but that of things to worry about, I would say Brogdon finding that sweet spot as to what his role is. I put that up there with Jason Tatum's slow shooting start in the first 2 games as things I could not be any less concerned about.
Well, you've seen that meme, Sean, of the calendar year, and like Tatum is, we all have questions about whether he's good or not. And then it's like all of a sudden he heats up here. And then by the time we get like March, April, it's like, holy shit, like this is insane. So, I don't know if you've seen that, but it tends to track every year. We seem to be in that same spot where like, oh man, Tatum's in a rough funk, but then you hit 2023, he'll turn it on, he'll hit the All-Star break, and then all of a sudden for like the last 2 months, he'll be all NBA, first team and just wipe the floor with everybody.
And if you watch the other dude in the finals and you watch the other dude for the first 2 games, maybe someone doesn't want to be Robin. And you have 2 Batmans.
I threw this out
earlier.
I threw this out
instead of the Spider-Man doppelganger thing. You got 2 Batmans.
Yeah. I think this out as a joke, but like considering what we've seen so far, and I know it's 2 preseason games and overreactions are ridiculous at this point. But
we have to react to.
I mean, it would be ludicrous. I think because there's just too many good guards in the league, but like, I don't know, Jaylen looks possessed through 2 games, and I just questioned both Adam and a friend of ours. I just threw the question out there: is Jaylen going to make All NBA this year? Because he just looks like he's on a mission right now. And
listen, that's going to require All NBA, MVP votes, and stuff like that. They require regular season success and finishing high in the league. Or, my guy Bill Simmons, they were talking the other day about could Jokic win a 3rd straight MVP, and it seems impossible because nobody wants to vote for the guy, right? 3 years in a row. But Denver is going to be better. They're going to be better this year. They could be the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. So what if Denver finishes number 1 in the West? What if they finish with the best record in the NBA, which was even better than he was last year? So, I'm sure he won't win 3 in a row, but it's very possible. It's just, listen, if you're a basketball fan, if you're an NBA fan, know that you're in a golden era right now. And the downside of that is there are going to be some really good teams that don't sniff the second round.
We've been at it for a little while, so we'll wrap this thing up, but I'll ask you this one last question before we let you go, which is, we've mentioned Ime Udoka multiple times at this point. So far, so good, but hey, it's been 2 preseason games, so none of this really matters. My question is that story, because people are still talking about it, like, not, and I don't mean water cooler. I mean, like, there's still reports, there's still stories being written. You still have people like Matt Barnes commenting. You still have Shams Charania going on the Pat McAfee show and not really saying anything about it. It's still a talking point. Is this going to be a distraction in any way, shape, or form for these players and Joe Mazzulla here this season? Or is this something that just sort of drifts into the background and gets ignored?
It would be unrealistic. It'd be condescending for me to suggest that it's not, and because things are going to come out, because that's the way of the world, and they'll probably the Murphy's Law, they'll come out at the worst possible time. But there's what if, as you said earlier, if there's going to be a separation, right, at some point, could that happen during the season? Is that going to be a year from now? There's too many things we don't know. So chances are people were up in arms because they didn't have all this information. Well, first of all, the Celtics were legally and ethically obligated to not share the information. The Celtics did. I mean, they were right all across the board here. No matter, people just lost their mind because they wanted the information. That said, information gets out. You think Golden State wanted to read about Draymond Green punching Jordan Poole in practice? How did that get out? It just got out. This isn't the old days. Stuff gets out. So, I mean, I think realistically, I don't think it's going to be a distraction except for when the next wave of things come out. And what if the Celtics are in a 3-game losing streak or something when that happens and you don't? There's just too many things you don't control. So, but I am very much of the belief that the players in the room here are focused on the task at hand, and that there are going to be a lot of outside forces that want information, are going to be digging for it. But, you know, I think these guys are used to living with distractions and the things that come up. It's the way of the world.
All right. Well, we'll call it a show there. There's still preseason games to be played, and obviously the regular season is right around the corner. Right? You know, as we sit here now, it's what, a week and change away. So terrific. It's approaching. Yeah, approaching. We're excited, looking forward to it, and appreciate everyone for following along and being with us throughout the beginning of a brand new season, obviously. And it's going to be, hopefully for more better reasons than not, a very interesting one. We, Evan Valenti, thank you as always for what you do both on camera and behind the scenes. Sean Grande, who, making the gestures. He texted me a very unflattering photo of me talking during this show while we were doing this show.
Making the point that,
that I talk too much or that I look stupid when I do it.
Oh.
All right. Thanks everybody. We'll catch you next time. See you later.